Well, welcome to the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. My name is Pastor Clay Lundberg, and I'm joined today by a very special guest. It's one of my very best friends. Her name is Pastor Peggy Hansen. Pastor Peggy serves at the Trinity United Methodist Church in Leeds, South Dakota. Peggy, just so glad to have you with me today for this conversation. Can you let our viewers know a little bit more about you, who you are, what's life like, and then what's something you're excited about at Lead Trinity this year?
Thanks, Clay. It's great to be with you and with you all who joined for this podcast. I am Peggy Hansen. I grew up in Southern California. I went to seminary in Colorado, then found my way to Pierre, and through that process got to meet some amazing people and colleagues like you, Clay, that helped me to realize I could make the Dakotas my home. And so I'm in my second appointment here in Leeds, South Dakota, where I serve the areas of Lead, Deadwood, and beyond. I'm married to a gentleman named Brian, and we got married and moved 4 days later. Fun fact. We have a beautiful daughter named Lillian, who's about 2 years old, and a dog, Corgi, named Mia, and two cats named Dobby and Winky.
Yes. Yep. And I think Dobby and Winky's birthdays were on my calendar for quite some time.
That doesn't surprise me. Corey still will send me a text message to wish them a happy birthday because we were part of the same ministry team. Clay, Corey, and I were, along with a few others, and they wanted to put in birthdays and anniversaries and spouses information. And I was one of the few people that was flying solo. So they included my cat's birthday as part of the celebration to extend, so I didn't feel left out.
Yay.
It is both awesome and slightly sad all at the same time.
Yep. So Peggy and I go way back. We were both commissioned and ordained together, commissioned in 13 and ordained in 16. We were a part of the first class of ordinands that were both commissioned and ordained by Bishop O when he served our Dakotas conference. So just glad to have you on for the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. So what's one thing you're excited about in 2022 for Lead Trinity?
There's so much going on. I'm just looking forward to seeing where the Spirit is leading us for what's next, especially with the youth.
Yeah.
We've kind of had some roller coastering with just attendance, which is expected, especially with COVID.
Yep.
And with certain churches taking precautions and certain churches not, how that just affects your attendance. But this group are really hungering and want to grow deeper in their faith and discipleship. They're also goofy and fun. So they're folks that I look forward to seeing every Wednesday night. And so I actually, prior to this, was able to set up stuff for tonight for what we're doing, because we're going to send Valentine's to our shut-ins. And for those who that might be a little challenging to do, we will also have some games going on.
Cool. Well, we listened to Pastor Steve's sermon from Sunday. It was called the Crab Bucket Syndrome. And in his introduction to worship, he talked about what the crab bucket syndrome is. It's basically that if I can't have anything nice, you can't either. So
yeah, they'll pull each other down, right?
Yeah.
Like if one starts to make it up, they pull each other down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that was a perfect tie-in to talk about jealousy and the story of Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat from Genesis chapter 37.
Joseph, you know what they say. Okay, sorry.
No, I totally had the same moment.
About Joseph novella, you got to throw in a little Andrew Lloyd Webber, right?
Absolutely, yes. Like I was kind of whisper singing it to myself the entire sermon on Sunday because that's my default reaction is Joseph, the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But the scripture was Genesis 37, the start of the Joseph story, Joseph getting this coat from his father and how the sons or the other brothers of Joseph respond in. It's a little testy there for a little bit among the brothers. And
really, I can't blame them.
No.
Because I am the youngest of four, and then later when my mom got remarried, I suddenly became the eldest of these three younger siblings that came to live with us. And I totally get both Joseph and the brothers, because Joseph was hey, and he was just blissfully ignorant and not helping himself. And the brothers were very righteously angry.
Yeah.
How dare the younger brother get not only favored, but that kind of favoritism? There's a tattletale element in there that,
Yep.
like, come on, Joseph, you're also not helping yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not about victim blaming in any way, shape, or form, but I think there are steps that you can take to help eliminate certain situations.
Correct.
And at least in this specific one, Joseph could have done better.
I like that Steve even named that in this as he was reading scripture. He's like, oh yeah, so Joseph had this dream, and it's that he's awesome and his brothers are not. And then he has another dream and he told people about it. Why would you tell people about it?
No, right?
Tell anybody about it. What?
Or at least, you got to have a buddy, or tell your younger brother, because he had a younger brother.
Yeah.
Don't go bragging to the older brothers and your father.
Yeah.
There's a level of disrespect there that Joseph should have known better on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think the favoritism goes to someone's head, and they're bulletproof, and all of a sudden, no, they're not.
Right? Have you seen Encanto?
I have not yet. I've listened to the soundtrack a number of times because my wife is in love with it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, so I need to watch it, but just have not taken the time to do so.
Okay, you need to make it a priority.
Okay.
And here's why.
Okay.
Because Encanto is kind of the reverse Joseph story.
Okay.
So this is no spoiler alerts. You find this out like instantly, is that this is a very magical and skilled, gifted family, and Mirabelle doesn't have a gift. And she feels unfavored by her family. And so it's an interesting contrast to the Joseph story.
Right.
And I know last week when you had Teresa on, she also did some Disney nerding stuff. So I feel like as a fellow Disney nerd, I couldn't not include some Disney.
Oh yeah, totally, for sure.
And friends, whoever connects with this podcast, like if you're like, I don't have children, I don't need to watch Encanto. No, friends, it speaks to all of us. If you are a slightly emotional person, please have some Kleenex. If you are someone who might be feeling exhausted of the weight of the world on your shoulders, definitely have some Kleenex. And I'm not going to apologize now, because you will have songs stuck in your head, considering they have surpassed Let It Go on billboards.
So then Steve moved into, they actually started off his sermon in kind of a dramatic fashion.
Yeah.
Because
he did.
It kind of got a little dark real fast, because the stories of jealousy that he shared were really, they packed a little bit of a punch, and just being challenged at the start of the sermon to picture a face, or to say I'm going to say a word and picture who comes to mind, and the word is jealousy.
Yeah. And it was like a flash image for me. Like I saw several faces or names just kind of flash in my brain of those moments I've been jealous or envious of others.
Yeah.
For multitudes of reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And I appreciated that in the illustrations, though they were very dramatic and kind of the extreme examples.
Right.
There were also those connection points of, when have I felt overlooked? When have I felt underappreciated, and or that I deserve that more than someone else?
Right.
When have I been willing to knock someone, pull a crab down? When have I been that lower crab pulling someone down? Or the hospital patients illustration just really got to me, because the beauty of the one that was trying to provide so much,
right,
but never told what he was doing, because it would lose the beauty of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And how that seed of jealousy through one thought became planted and so destructive.
Yeah.
And that it actually made him more physically ill when he was in that jealous state of mind. versus that hour of appreciation.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yep, the hour of storytelling and just the trying to because the guy that got propped up could have just easily, they weren't really supposed to be talking. And so the
Yeah.
guy could have easily just said nothing and looked out the window to the wall and just said nothing. And instead he tried to enrich the life of the jealous person. And yeah, it's really easy to like want to align ourselves with that person and say we would do that. We would totally do that, and ignore the fact that jealousy does exist in our lives, and hopefully doesn't reign supreme, but definitely is a thing.
Right. And how quickly could that have been shifted by asking permission to get a glimpse one day, or but because he didn't stop to ask the question. And I think that's part of where today we have so much jealousy is we don't stop to pause and practice that pause and ask the question of, and whatever that question could be of, how did you get to this point? Or what are you doing to be successful? Or what am I missing? And you see, as Steve talks about later, the grass is greener on the other side. You see the work and the fertilizer and all of the watering and all that goes in to make the grass green, instead of just seeing a green grass.
Right.
I think those illustrations are so important because jealousy shuts us down. Oh, yeah. And doesn't bring out the best side in ourselves.
No, not at all. I want to just circle back to Joseph for a second. Steve calls the Joseph story the oldest and most vivid story of jealousy in the entire Bible.
It's like, that's a pretty strong statement to say in the entire Bible, because everyone survived in the Joseph story. In the Cain and Abel story, not everyone did.
That's true.
In some of the prophets, the level of jealousy of while being in exile, the experience of the prophets themselves. Yeah,
for sure.
For sure. I think that there's even some strong cases in the stories with Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the disciples being jealous. And how they dealt with it. I would still say Joseph was more extreme than some of the disciples one, because again, none of the disciples were sold into slavery. But but I think it's one of the clearest and relatable stories of jealousy. Cain and Abel is probably the most extreme, which would go with Steve's intro. But following that relationalness and how jealousy continues to play a theme throughout the entire novella. Because the parts that we don't sing about with Tamar and some of those other pieces, and friends, if you haven't read all of the Joseph novella in entirety, I highly recommend it. And there are some great studies out there that can help you journey through it. But
for sure.
It's a tangent.
And just for reference, like the novella itself is like Genesis chapter 37 all the way through 50. Like it's the almost the entire like last quarter of the book of Genesis is just the Joseph story.
And it's like called a novella because it's a mini novel.
And like one of the things I wrote in my notes is like, how does jealousy play a role throughout the entire story of Joseph? Because like it's a real it's a constant refrain of the way that jealousy leads people to act badly and behave poorly. Even the Joseph's interaction later with Potiphar's wife, like that really got to me as I was thinking about that really is, she was jealous of, her not being able to do what she wanted to do, and was jealous that Joseph was,
not game for also doing what she would like to do.
Right. Yes. Thank you. I was trying to find a delicate way to put that, and you crushed it. So thank you. But and then, it leads Joseph deeper into hardship until he finally turns the corner, and the dreams that he had at the start of the story start to come true when he becomes the advisor to Pharaoh. And the narrative flips because it's Joseph that has all the food and the resources, and his brothers come and like, they don't realize it's Joseph, but yet there still has to be that level of jealousy there. of this. And, Joseph shows us how to react to jealousy in a healthy and appropriate way.
Right.
Rather than in I'm going to beat you up and sell you to some, Ishmaelites, the tearing of the coat and whatever else happens. Like Joseph, the whole story just has this dramatically ironic ending.
Joseph shows us how to respond to jealousy. So yes, even though he was a precocious young man who needed to be humbled a little, he still, even though he was experiencing that jealousy, he still continued to seek out his brother's approval. He still continued to try and be part of that group. Then when he was in Potiphar's household with that whole situation, he still continued to rise above. When he was in jail and you saw the baker and the chief steward, they clearly had some power dynamics happening there too.
For sure.
And instead of Joseph choosing a side or, kind of being triangulated or manipulated or joining in on that, because how often do we do that?
Right.
He again steps back and says, here's what your dreams mean. Hey, chief steward, please remember me. Baker, I'm sorry. and then when the chief steward, it takes him almost a year to remember this gentleman named Joseph in jail who could interpret dreams, and he does. And then he gets promoted. And again, I'm sure there were those who were jealous of Joseph, because who is this foreigner?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Getting promoted.
Right.
But yet at the same time, he's saving our lives literally. So I guess I can't be too jealous of him.
But yeah, it still could have been me,
Exactly.
Yeah. Why not me?
He could be under me, but I could be the lead person. Right.
Right.
And then when the brothers come and they're jealous of that the Egyptians have all this and they're starving, I imagine also the jealousy that Joseph has towards them, because they've now had so many years with one another. They're caring for his younger brother.
Right.
And even though Joseph tests them, it's not from a place of spite. It feels like he wants to make sure that he's not setting himself up to be hurt again.
Yeah.
And he's kind of testing the waters to make sure that when he reveals himself, it's not to the point where he gets smacked back down, but that they appreciate who he's become and can see how God worked throughout his story, and also to offer some reconciliation and what's the word? Absolvement, or like forgiveness.
Yeah.
And then he gets to see his dad, who by this point is how old?
Very. Yeah.
And they're knowing that he was favored by his dad, and to lose so many years with his dad. I think it's the layers of jealousy.
Right.
That, as Steve says, this is the most vivid, that I think that's where that statement becomes true.
Yep.
Well, as we were talking about jealousy, and as I said earlier, we were talking about, Steve says, these stages of how we journey through jealousy.
Yeah.
And that first stage is the grass is greener on the other side.
Right.
Some things that we don't think about is how the grass gets greener. And two, is the grass even real?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I wish Steve would have talked about that. Again, growing up in Southern California, one of the things that was super popular as I was becoming an adult and seeing that in friends who were owning houses and whatnot, was laying AstroTurf, a nice fake grass.
Yep.
Not like playground AstroTurf.
No.
They actually it looks like grass.
Yep.
But you don't have to water it. So that's helpful during drought seasons. You don't have to mow it or anything else.
Yeah.
And you have this beautiful lawn every day of the year, which in Southern California matters, because out here we want our lawns to go brown. They should look gross right now. Like there's that expectation.
Right.
Versus California has this expectation of almost spring.
Yep.
All year round, with the flowers and the grass and the trees. Instead of getting jealous, how do we celebrate? So I'm like, cool, you have green grass. What do you do to keep it green? And that's what I think Steve gets to. And then like
Yep.
that second time of recognizing like, oh wait, that grass needs to be cared for.
Yep.
It's not all sparkle.
Yep.
It's not as good as I think it is.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that third of, wait, let me stop and appreciate what I do have.
Mm-hmm.
My grass is green. Does it have a few brown spots because I have animals that use it? Yes.
Yep.
But that is the sign of the way that my house is alive and my house is a home.
Yep.
And stopping to appreciate what we have instead of always wanting the next thing.
Yes.
Because I'm someone who I play the comparing game.
Mm-hmm.
Like I look at other churches and I was like, oh, Clay's got a podcast.
Right.
I don't know how to do a podcast. Why? Like, I'm glad I get to be part of this.
Yeah.
But I don't need to compare this.
Right.
Because there's things that I'm doing that you're like, dude, Peggy's doing that.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to celebrate with you.
Yeah.
And I want you to be able to celebrate with me. And
absolutely. Absolutely.
I think I learned of that crab bucket thing and realized I never wanted to be like that as an adult.
Right.
And I think that's where Steve, as he moves from these stages and he gets into that jealousy and fear.
Yeah.
Go hand in hand, that I was like, oh, I just got the goosies right now, because I don't think we talk about that enough.
No, for sure.
Because when we're jealous, we try to grip on tighter because we try to hold tighter to say, no, look, I want the attention or whatever that is, or I'm still good enough, or what I have is still good enough.
Yep.
Because we're afraid of becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
Because if everyone's looking over there, no one's looking here. Instead of appreciating the uniqueness of each individual.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot in some of like the women's groups I'm part of, because they's like, hey, you don't have to knock off each other's crowns to make yours stand taller.
Right.
But in middle school, that's what we're taught to do, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that fear and jealousy. Right. And I love when Steve said that Jesus never promised fairness.
Yes. Yep.
Dang it, Steve. He was right. And I was like, yeah.
I mean, Jesus is the one that will leave the 99 to go save the one. You know?
We're like, yes, when we're the one that's but when we're the 99 and we're like, Jesus, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Because again, we want attention. And if we're not getting it from somewhere, we're going to get it from somewhere.
We're going to find it. Yeah, for sure.
And we're really good at, like, I know you and I do this, like, we're really good about, life isn't fair. Jesus doesn't do that. Like, we know it, we preach it. But when it comes to the unfairness in our own lives, we're like, oh, come on.
Yes.
Because we don't like it.
Right.
The same as anyone else.
That's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
For sure. When life isn't fair, we get jealous.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he talks about how we combat that. Which, again, you ready for the Disney nerd? I'm going to see if you can guess this one.
Okay.
When he's talking about when the world we live in and life is unfair, how do we combat that? How do we live in? What do we live into? We live in love. And so as he's talking about this, do you know what Disney reference came into my head about love being how we should live? Remember, I have a 2-year-old that is obsessed.
Oh, Frozen.
Yes. At the end of it, love thaws.
Oh, okay.
Right? Fear is her enemy.
Yep.
And that's what creates all of the sharp, jagged edges of the ice and the dangerous conditions. And then all of a sudden, she realizes love thaws. And for her, it wasn't jealousy. It was genuine fear of hurting someone.
Yeah.
But I think that goes together.
Yeah.
Like, love thaws. And I think jealousy is a seed of frozenness. Like, I think that hurts our hearts the same way that fear and hatred and all of those other very normal emotions, but if not checked, are unhealthy.
Yeah.
And that's where I really appreciated, and how he then started sharing some of the scriptures of God is love.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
perfect love, and how it is exemplified in Christ.
Yep.
So, Clay, as we kind of come to the conclusion of Steve's sermon, he talked about how Jacob could have helped Joseph in offering a little bit of humility with, and helping with some of that jealousy that he saw. He had to see for me.
Oh, he had to have seen it. Yeah.
And what it looks like to appreciate, like, and he uses the example Zebulun. Like, you are the only Zebulun there is.
Yep.
You have 3 kids.
Yes.
You love them all, but you love them each different.
Oh, yeah.
And you see different personalities and gifts. And what works with Auden may not work the same with Simon, as I'm sure you've discovered, right?
Yup. Oh, yes.
And now you have a little girl, so good luck.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Who knows, like, her personality as it develops, because it's still a little too early to tell.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the jealousy thing, is we lose sight of each individual beautiful human being. Because when we compare, we stop seeing the uniqueness and individuality.
Right.
Again, it comes back into Encanto. Watch the movie. So, Clay, what are you doing next week or this coming Sunday?
Yeah, so I am actually back in the pulpit now. Again, just wanted to give just thanks to Steve for preaching during the month of January, so I could take parental leave. It was super. It was so nice knowing that I had consistent pulpit supply lined up for the entire month.
Yeah, what a relief.
Yeah, it was awesome. And Steve did a great job. But now Steve is going to be preaching over at Canton Lutheran on Sunday because their pastor had surgery and is doing fine, but is not able to preach this week. And so he's going to be filling in over at Canton Lutheran. And I am starting a 4-week message series called Love Lessons from a Loveless Church. We're going to talk about the letter of 1 Corinthians and Paul's interaction with Corinth, and the fact that Corinth had a big problem with love.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, and so we're going to be focusing on how they approach the meal of communion as we prepare for the meal of communion here in the church, and just talk about how, the love of Christ is proclaimed in this meal, in both elements and in the whole story of why communion happened, and that we are called to receive that love in communion, and also then called to go forth and share that love with the world. So Steve kind of set me up really nicely by ending his sermon about love, and then we're going to dig into what love is and does and looks like in a Christian context. So that's where we're heading Sunday.
Awesome. Just remember, love thaws.
Yes, I might definitely steal that. For sure.
It's Elsa. I can't say that it's mine.
Yep, that's awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. I want to just give thanks to Peggy for joining me for this conversation. Eric Stern will be back next week. Whatever respiratory stuff his son had going on last week is now going through their entire house. Hooray! And so he texted me and said, I have no voice. So kind of hard to record a podcast. Yes, definitely. But Eric will be back next week. And so be sure to join us in worship online or in person at 10 o'clock on Facebook Live or at the church on Sunday, and then back here next week for the podcast. Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.